Okay, new video. So I'm going to talk about subvocalization. I'm going to define it. I'm going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about the survey. That's what I'm going to do. Hello and welcome back to Bookish, and welcome to a video in which I'm going to talk about the results of a poll I posted in the community tab of my channel about subvocalization. So this was something I've become kind of interested in, particularly interested in it as it applies to, for me, my ability to enjoy audiobooks. So it's kind of a combination of those two things. If you answered the question on the poll, you left a comment. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate you helping me gather this information to kind of answer a question I had for myself. So if you don't know what subvocalization is, I'm going to define it this way. It's hearing the voice inside your head read the words as you read along. You're not actually reading out loud, not moving my lips, but just actually hearing my own voice oftentimes inside my head, or your own voice inside your head as you read. That's what I called subvocalization. And I had this idea that because I'm a subvocalizer, and I would consider myself, as I think Marion Ryan described it in her comment, a hardcore subvocalizer, that might be affecting my ability to enjoy audiobooks. And so I created the poll. I put the questions out there to see if, the data I got, which, I'm bad at analyzing data and probably at writing the questions, to see if the data I got supported my own ideas about subvocalization. So real quickly, I am a hardcore subvocalizer. I hear my voice in my head all the time, whether I'm reading or talking to you. As I'm talking to you right now, this is the voice I oftentimes hear, or I usually hear in my head when I'm reading or going about my daily business. I have an active interior monologue, and it carries over when I read, so that literally when I read, I hear my voice. Now, this is always for me. Somebody might make the point, well, you're not subvocalizing a street sign. And you're right. I'm not subvocalizing a stop sign. But in part, that's because it's a symbol. It's not really words to me. It's a symbol that I recognize that means stop. So I don't read the word stop in my head necessarily. I don't read the speed limit sign necessarily subvocally. But with the exception perhaps of that, I subvocalize everything. Everything that I read when I'm writing, I'm subvocalizing what I'm writing. When I'm writing my notes, reading over my notes, I subvocalize that. And on top of that, I believe that I actually hear different accents and different voices when I subvocalize. And this may just be a delusion on my part, but there are certain accents that I think my interior monologue, my voice reads in. Particularly Irish accents. I believe I hear an Irish accent when I read things by Irish writers and dialogue by Irish writers. Obviously, being from the South, being from Texas, I hear a Southern dialect in my head. When the book is narrated or told or written from the point of view of a woman, I hear a feminized voice in my head when I'm reading. Now, this may be a sign of some kind of deeper psychosis. And, it's possible that I'm just tricking myself into believing that's true. But I feel that that's true when I'm reading. And I think that adds a certain richness oftentimes then to reading books. And maybe this is why, I have a real affection for Irish, Scottish, English, Southern writers, because that voice in my head works that way. So, a great example of a book that worked for me like this was A Ghost in the Throat by Darren Griffa, which I read several years ago, and really was one of the first books where I realized, hey, I think I'm hearing the accent while I read. Now, a couple things about subvocalization. I know subvocalization slows down my reading. I don't care. To me, subvocalization enriches the reading experience for me in all kinds of ways, and I have no interest in getting rid of that. But when it comes to audiobooks, I thought, well, maybe, as I said, this is why I struggle with audiobooks, because the voice I hear in my head when I read, my subvocalization voice, is so familiar to me, is a part of what makes reading special to me, that another voice reading a book to me is intrusive, or it feels like it is reading the book in a way which I wouldn't read. And so I wanted to know from you and from people who took the poll, whether or not you subvocalize. And if you subvocalize, do you like audiobooks and subvocalize? Do you not like audiobooks and subvocalize? Do you not subvocalize and like audiobooks? Do you not subvocalize and don't like audiobooks? So one of the things I've been doing really over the course of this year, as I've been listening to more audiobooks, is figuring out what kind of audiobooks work best for me. So in terms of narration, I like the single narrator audiobook the best. Maybe this is because the first audiobooks I listened to are on LibriVox, which usually have a single narrator. I like for that single narrator to do the voices really lightly so that they're not like, I don't feel like they're overacting the voices of the different characters, but I do like there being some distinction because, as I said, I think in my head I do that to a certain extent. And I really like books that are read by the author themselves. That really works for me probably the best. There's some genres I found that work for me better as audiobooks, and that would be like memoir. Celebrity memoirs are great audiobooks, I think, because it kind of fits what I'm doing. Mysteries, I've discovered I really like listening to mysteries as audiobooks. Some nonfiction, but probably not history as nonfiction. But I've been developing this taste in terms of audiobooks. So anyway, I put up the poll, and I'm going to share with you the results of the poll if you haven't already seen them. So I had about 213 people respond. Again, thank you. 60% of the people who responded were subvocalizers and 40% were not. I have to be honest with you, I assumed subvocalizers were a much smaller, or I assumed non-subvocalizers were a much smaller minority than there were. Kind of, I guess, just a natural human ego thing. I assume most people read like me, and they do kind of, but a lot of people are not subvocalizers. The percentage actually surprised me. Among the subvocalizers liked audiobooks that are rated about 2-to-1 compared to subvocalizers who didn't like audiobooks, and the same thing was true for non-subvocalizers. Non-subvocalizers like audiobooks at a rate of about 2-to-1. So what this basically proves is that my theory is completely unsound, that vocalizing or subvocalizing or not doesn't really have any impact on someone's ability to or their like for audiobooks. So, that goes out the window. Other things, though, I learned from the comments I thought were really interesting, and that one was that people had different interpretations of what subvocalizing meant or were unclear on what it meant, and I should have, provided a definition to be more clear. The second thing I think that I learned is that a lot of people who don't subvocalize or do subvocalize can pick and choose when they do it. A lot of comments suggest that people subvocalize when reading certain genres, certain authors, or books from certain countries. I was impressed that people could turn it on and off. I don't know why I thought that. I know people can be taught to not subvocalize, you can train themselves not to, but the idea that you could flip back and forth, completely alien to me. I, by the way, have read without subvocalizing, but it is a miserable, difficult experience for me. And I have a hard time concentrating without hearing the voice in my head. So again, I'll say I just don't even bother to not do it. And then one of the things that surprised me is I got a lot of comments, and most of the comments were actually from the people who classified themselves, I think, as non-subvocalizers, which makes me wonder, are non-subvocalizers more in touch with how they read, think about how they read, have thought about how they read than people like me, obviously, who are subvocalizers. Also, it became apparent that the way I set up the questions put some people in a difficult position, since I hadn't contemplated people turning subvocalization on and off. It hadn't occurred to me that my questions couldn't be as definitive as they were, but that was also a problem. And then the last thing I discovered from this is that I'm kind of the person who's in the minority as a subvocalizer who struggles a little bit with audiobooks, let's say, and who cannot turn my subvocalization off. Anyway, I thought this was really interesting. I don't know how interesting you might have found it watching the video, but as always, I appreciate your participation in the survey if you did. I look forward to your comments in the comment section below in this video, and as always, thank you for watching.